So let's go through 2.2 part 2. We are learning today about future value. So to start off with, let's do some review. It says determine the number of years required for a deposit of $1,850 to earn $249.75 interest at 4.5%. You tell me, because I wasn't here, what is the formula for interest? Yes, Kira? I equals PRT. Perfect, thank you so much. So I equals PRT, and so I think what's helpful is for us to start figuring out what goes where. If it says determine the number of years required, so number of years required, do you see that we're trying to figure out number of years required? That would be our T. That's what we're trying to find, right? A deposit of $1,850, where does that fit in? Which part out of this formula is the deposit? Principal, P. So right here would be that part there. And then when it says to earn $249.75 interest, where does that value go? That would be our I. Everybody good with where we're getting this from? And then interest at 4.5%. I don't want to write it as 4.5%. What do I need to do to be able to plug it into the formula? 0.045. Everybody see what we did? Percent means out of 100. So we moved that decimal over 2 places. Oops, I'm going in the wrong direction. 2 places, and that's how we get this 0.045, which would be our R value. So we can go ahead and start plugging things in. I, that's going to be our 249.75 equals our P is going to be the 1,850 times the R, which was 0.045, times the thing that we're looking for or interested in, and that would be our T. So far, so good? This is review from yesterday, so I'm kind of flying through. And there's a number of ways that we can do this. Maybe to start off, let's take these two values and let's actually calculate what they are. Do you see that this is just on the right-hand side? We're just dealing with multiplication of 3 values. So we could multiply these two numbers here. So I would get, here's the hardest part of my job, is keeping the color straight, 75 equals, when we multiply these two values together, go ahead and do that on your calculator. We would get 83.25, and we still have our T value. Everybody good with that? Algebra is all about opposites. You're going to hear me repeating that over and over again. So this is algebra because I have a variable and I have some numbers. I want the variable by itself. How do I get that T by itself? What is the opposite of what you see going on here? Richard? Divide. We want to leave the T here. What do we divide out, Chloe? Yeah, so I'm going to show you the proper steps. We would actually, in order to, if we have 83.25 times T, the opposite would be dividing by 83.25. But if I do that on the right side, I also have to do that on the left side because an equation is like a scale. We have to keep it balanced. So I would divide by 83.25. You don't have to write out every single one of these steps, but I want to make sure that you understand what we're doing. Do you see that some number over itself just cancels and leaves us with a 1? So on the right side, I would just have the variable t. And on the left side, if we have 249.75 and we divide it by this, we end up getting a value of 3. You would punch that into your calculator, you would do this number divided by this number, and we would end up with 3. 3 is our t value, so what is it that we just found? The time. So it says determine the number of years, da 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 da. I would say it takes 3 years because it told me up here that we're representing this in terms of years to earn $249.75 in interest. You have to write this in a sentence. The reason why you have to write it in a sentence is because you see the potential to just plug things into a formula and spit out an answer, but then not even know what it is that you just did or what you found. This is what shows that you've understood what it is that we're calculating or what we're working with. So far, so good? Moving on. Future value. So this is brand new. Future value is the sum of the principal amount you borrowed plus the interest. It's also sometimes referred to as final amount. This is important stuff, so I'm going to underline it. Future value sometimes is called the final amount. So you're copying this down, right, everybody? Okay, so a way that we can write this formula is we can abbreviate it here and say future value equals the principal plus the interest. So basically, I don't really have any new calculations for you today. We're going to do the same thing as what we just did in the review example, but we just add one more step onto that. Let's go through this first example together. It says, well, actually, here's a way that we could write that formula just using variables. Future value, we can also abbreviate to use the variable A, equals the principal plus the interest, so P plus I. So if you see that, this is what it's referring to. So let's go through and work on this first example. It says the principal is $900. We know that it's going to go right here. So I'm going to say equals 900, and I'm going to fill that in already. And the future value is 1,040. I'm going to fill that in here. 1,040. We're done with that. Plus, or sorry, find the interest. So I'm going to say plus I. Pretty straightforward so far. It's just a matter of knowing which variable means what and plugging that into our formula. Algebra is all about opposites. I want I by itself, so what do I need to do to get I by itself? Yes? Yeah. We're going to subtract 900. If I'm going to subtract that on the right, I need to also do that on the left. That's what allows me to cancel it out here. So on the right, I would have an I. And on the left, well, what do I get when I do 1,040 minus 900? What does that leave me with? You could just do that mental math. Yeah, it's going to be $140. So the interest is $140. So that would be how we would give our answer, because basically in this whole chapter we're dealing with word problems, right? And always with the word problem, the last step is putting it into a sentence to show you've understood what you calculated. It wasn't just you plugging a bunch of numbers into a formula but not understanding where it's coming from. Questions? Comments? Anything? So far so good? Moving on. Find the future value of an investment of $1,550, earning 5% for 150 days. I'm going to compare and contrast this a little bit to what we just looked at. We have this formula, I'm going to write it in this color. A equals P plus I. Is this formula going to do the trick in this question? No. And how do I know that? Well, it says find the future value. So what variable is the future value in this equation? This would be like the A, so I'm going to write that there. Of an investment of 1,550, what would that be in terms of variables? An investment of 1,550? That would be our P value, right? If investment means the money you're putting in, that's the principal, right? Okay, then here's where things get tricky. Earning 5%, that would be like what, 0.05? Everybody get that? Because there's like an imaginary decimal there, we move it over twice, that's how we get the 0.05. But is there what variable is that in this formula? Is that in this formula? No, but we have another formula, I equals, what is it again? PRT. And notice this. Oh, things are about to get crazy here. Do you see that this is like the same thing as this? Like I is equal to all of that stuff. So we can split this into steps to help make sense of this, but I just wanted to show you that this 0.05 would be which variable out of these two equations? This would be like the R, so that would be like this little R here. That makes sense? And then it says for 150 days, well, what would that be? And where does that go? T, and that could go here. Are we getting how this sort of fits together? So let's start to fill things in. This says A equals P, so I can fill in P. That would be like the 1550, right? Sorry, I'm using the wrong color. How could I do that? 1550, so that would be this part, plus I, the colors are stressing me out, plus I. Okay, so then we want to figure out what this is. And in order to figure out what this is, I need to first use this equation so that I can figure out my I value. Does that make sense so far? So I'm going to take this equation and I'm going to plug things into here. So I'm going to say I equals P, which was our 1550, times R, which was 0.05, times T. Okay, so here's the interesting part. It says times T, but this is given in 150 days. Do you see that in the last example? We did this in years. How do we change this or convert this from days into years? Kira? Yeah, does everybody see there's 150 50 days, but we want to know this in terms of years. So how many days in a year? 365, so that's why we're dividing by 365. Does that make sense to everybody? So I could punch that into my calculator, or to show you where we're getting this from and to make it super clear, I'm just going to write it like this. Are we good with that so far? So let's punch that into our calculator. So we could do 150 divided by 365. I'm going to take that number and multiply it by 0.05. And then I'm going to take that and multiply it by 1550. And I'm going to approximate what I get here. I get that my I value after doing all of this would be around 31.85, because we're dealing with money. So that's why I've chosen to round it to 2 decimal places. Is that making sense so far? So this is basically this. I can plug that in here. So my A value would be this 1550 plus what we just found our new value to be. That would be our 31.85. And when we do that, we get our A value is equal to, in dollars, $1,581.85. When we put this all together, is the future value. I'm getting lazy, but there we go. Does that make sense? So in this example, we used our first simple interest formula to figure out the I value, and then we took that and plugged it into the new formula. So we were dealing with 2 different formulas here. We had this one that we used first to figure out I, and then we plugged that into here to figure out the future value. Good? Questions? Last example. Are we okay to move on? What sum of money must be invested to have $7,500 at 6.5% in 2 years? Yep. What sum of money must be invested? What sum of money must be invested? So which variable are we talking about? What are we looking for? What sum of money must be invested? What do we call the money that's invested? Interest would be what we make on it. What's the sum of money that we invest? Rio? That's the principal. Does that make sense to everybody? That's the amount of money that you put in or invest. That's what principal is. Good? I can make this bigger because the last example we're now done with, right? Is everybody okay with this? Yeah. And I can bring it back after for anyone who wasn't done. So, principal is what we're looking for. It's important to first figure that out. So what sum of money must be invested to have 7,500? What do you think that 7,500 represents? Yeah, so future value, right? Which variable did we use for that? FV, or we called it A, right? So A is that future value that you'll see. And then at 6.5%, which variable would that represent? That'd be R. And what's a better way for us to say that? 0.065. Again, because we took that decimal and slid it over 2 spots, and then we fill it in with a 0. Right? 6.5%. Per means out of, cent means 100. out of 100. So that's 6.5 over 100. That's the reason we do that. In 2 years, what would that represent? That'd be which variable? That'd be the t, and it's already in years, which makes life easier for us. We don't have to do that whole conversion thing. So I'm going to write down the formulas that we know. A equals P plus I. But when I look at this, I see that I also have this R value there. So I know I must also be using the other formula, the simple interest formula, which I'm going to write like this. I equals PRT, so that you can see that we're going to connect the two formulas together. I hope that this is helping to make it a bit clearer or easier for you to understand. So, what is the future value? What can I plug into here? Let's 7,500. So I'm going to check that off. I dealt with that. P is the one that we're looking for, so I'm just going to leave this. That's what we're trying to find. And I, we don't know right now, but I can start to fill things into the formula for I. Do you see that I is just equal to this PRT? So I'm going to start filling this in here. P is what we're looking for. R is that 0.065. And our t value is 2 years. So that would be 2. So the problem here is I don't know I, and I also don't know P. This is kind of an intense question. So if you're struggling with this, don't worry. This is like the above and beyond stuff. Focus on the last one if you are struggling. But does everybody see that I have this variable here? Do you see that that variable there is also equal to all of this? So I can actually take out the I and plug in all of that stuff there. Do you see what I mean? I feel like, what grade is this? This is like almost like grade 10 level stuff, but it's okay, we're ready for that. Plus, instead of I here, I'm just going to plug this stuff in. So I'm going to say plus P times 0.065 times 2. Everybody with me so far? Oh, sorry, I can also plug this in. That's 7,500, right? Might as well fill in whatever we're able to. You okay so far? This is intense because we're having to work backwards and we're plugging one formula into the other. So this is like a lot. In hindsight, maybe we should have done this tomorrow, but that's okay, we're already doing it. So 7,500 equals P plus, can we clean this up a little bit? Could we do something to simplify just that term? Yeah, we can multiply these two together. Do you see we could do 2 times 0.65 and we would get 0.13p. So let's just ignore the left side. 7,500 equals, it's like we're counting up how many p's we have. How many p's is that one? If it doesn't have a number in front of it, how many is it? We have 1 p and we're adding 0.13 p to it. So how many p's is that? 1.13 p. Kind of making sense? Or this is crazy? Okay, know this. If it is crazy, don't worry about it. I've purposely chosen to do one of the difficult ones together. But if you're struggling with this, don't stress at all. We want to figure out P, so how do I get rid of this 1.13? Divide it by 1.13, which I better also do on the other side. See why I'm letting you use calculators? Do you see that these two would just cancel? That's the whole reason we do that. So our P value would be 7,500 divided by this, which leaves us with a value of $6,637. and 17 cents. So this amount must be invested to have $7,500 in 2 years. I feel like I should apologize to you for this question, but I mean, here is your work for today. And you also have the stuff from 2.2 part 1.